Welcome to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
All right, let's get started. I'm here. This is Bob Manley, and I'm here with my partners Ken and Chuck, and we have brought to you somebody pretty special from our recent visit to South Africa. As many of you know, when Ken and I and Chuck went away in January for 2 weeks, and we visited the wine region of South Africa. And during our travels, we were introduced to the winemaker and director of Remhoogte Wine Estate. I hope I didn't ruin your name too badly in its pronunciation, but Chris will clarify that for us. We have with us Chris Boustred. And again, sorry for having trouble with your name, but Chris will clarify that for us as well. And so Chris is the winemaker with Remhoogte in Stellenbosch, which is one of the most famous regions of South Africa. I believe they've been producing wine there for several hundred years. And he shared with us, we sat with Chris for, maybe a couple hours, and we shared many of his wines and learned lots of his stories and the history of his winery. And he was a really consummate host, and he gave us a tour of his winery, and we got to walk through the cellar, and so it was really a great experience. So we wanted to share Chris with you. And so a little background, the winery that Chris is the owner and winemaker of started in 1812. So it's been going on for over 200 years. That's quite a history. And Chris took over the winemaking in 2007 from his father, who was formerly the winemaker. And Chris believes that wine is made in the vineyard, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. It's not the first time we've heard that, but it's something that really strikes home with us. So we're looking forward to hearing about that. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks so much, Bob. Ken, guys, it's good to see you guys again.
Right. Yep.
Likewise.
In very different circumstances. Amazing how much has changed in a very short space of time.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So before I get into my questions, I just want to let everybody out there who's joined us today know that if you are watching, to please comment or like the video so that we know you're there. And if you like, share it amongst your friends so that we can share this experience with others if you like. And please leave any questions in your comment section as well. We are happy to answer the questions. We'll try to get to them during the video, but if time does not allow, then we will go back to those comments later and be sure and answer all of your questions. And maybe, Chris, if you have a moment, you can jump on later and answer questions that maybe we don't know the answers to. That would be awesome. And so without further ado, let's get started. So Chris, I want to start right out. I remember when we sat with you, you told us a little bit of the history of your winery, and it was quite fascinating. You had some really great stories. And so if you wouldn't mind, just start by giving us a little background. How did your winery get started, and what brought you here today?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, it's we're seen as a new world wine growing area, but we're actually pretty old. So South Africa and Cape Town began in 1652. We were the halfway stop-off point on the spice route. So when ships went from Europe all the way around to the east, they would stop off in Cape Town to resupply. And that's when they started farming, and that's when they started making wine to supply the ships. So the South African history is long. The first wine areas, or the oldest wine area in South Africa is actually Constantia, which is very close to Cape Town and Cape Town Harbour. But it's quite a small area, and it's on the mountain, because as you move into the flats there, it's just kind of beach sand. So they moved across what we call the Cape Flats, which is a sort of a big expanse of very sandy soil. And the first mountain range and sort of bowl of farmable mountain area that they hit was Stellenbosch. And So Stellenbosch is the second oldest wine area in South Africa, and our property is called Remhoogte, and it's actually named after the pass that came down the mountain on the farm. And when the ox wagons used to go to and from the harbour, supplying the ships, they would be the last pass that they would come down into Stellenbosch, and the ox wagons used to have to put on their brakes. So they named the pass Remhoogte, which is Dutch for break heights. So very like high mountains. And so the Dutch were always very creative in naming stuff. But anyway, they named, so then in 1812, when they officially gave out title deeds, we still have the original title deed from 1812. They named the farm after the pass that comes down the farm. So and that is Remhoogte. So that's where the farm kind of began. So it was running before 1812, and there were vineyards on the property before 1812. But we, with the first official documentation and title deed for the property we have is from 1812. So our family, we only actually purchased the property in the early 90s. We're the third family to own the farm, and my dad basically, our family's originally from Johannesburg, and we moved down. My dad started making wine, and then I took over from him. So there's a lot of history in the Stellenbosch area, very mountainous, but all began to supply ships.
You had mentioned, I think, and I hope I get this right, there was something to do with the crown jewel that was what is that story? That was
so a lot of people ask, you know, where your family's originally from, because I'm obviously not originally from Africa, you know, as you can tell by my skin tone. But anyone who's been here longer than kind of 4 or 5 generations is quite a big mix. But my dad's side of the family, they came out from Ireland, and he, just after they arrived, his father passed away. His father actually had a transport business here, and he used with ox wagons, was transporting stuff, and he died quite young. And then Thomas Cullinan, who was my great-great-grandfather, took over this business, but you know, it wasn't really his passion. So he was really into geology and things like that. So he used to collect. He moved to Johannesburg, which is where my family's from, and he would collect semi-precious stones and polish them up and sell them, and you know, it's kind of how he made some pocket money when he was younger. And then when he got older, he found he was riding out from Johannesburg on his horse, and he found this volcanic chute where he thought he might find diamonds, and he ended up purchasing the small holding and mining it. And he found in 1902 the biggest, at the time it was the biggest uncut diamond ever been found. And it's not anymore, but it's still the most valuable diamond that's ever been found. But South Africa was in the process of gaining its independence from Britain. And it was such a unique find that, as part of a sort of a parting gift to say thank you for our independence, the diamond was given to the royal family. So it was then the king. And they then cut it into 2 stones. So it's now the main diamond in the scepter of the British crown jewels, and the main diamond in the crown. And they're called the Greater and the Lesser Star of Africa. So it's a bit of our family history. So we actually gave his name to our reserve red, the Sir Thomas Cullinan. But a lot of people ask, that's not how we bought a wine farm, because he gave the diamond away. So he's just very lucky that we named a wine after him.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And we're gonna get now to the present day and talk a little more about you and your winery. Before I do that, though, I have a little special thing to share with you. I put together some pictures from our recent trip, and I'm going to share them with everybody. Give me a second. I'm going to pull up my where is it?
That's great. It was such
there
a
it is.
beautiful vineyard and location. Just an amazing setting, very reminiscent to me of parts of California and the wine country there.
Absolutely.
And the wonderful dogs, of course.
It was It was such a great experience being there with you and learning about your place, your winery, and the region, and it was just such a joy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and Ken, I think I like your, I think the comment on being similar to California. When I finished studying, I worked in Napa, and it does have a very, we've got the cold sea, so we have, it's actually the current, the cold Benguela current that comes up from Antarctica is what kind of feeds into the surrounding ocean around us. So that cold sea is a very similar feel to the bay and the Bay Area in outside San Francisco. And so it's got a very similar feel, just our mountains are a little higher.
Yeah, it's a different geology. I'm a geologist. I like the landforms and how they're controlled and relate to the underlying rocks that are there. And so it's very fascinating. Beautiful countryside. I loved my time in South Africa. It was amazing.
A beautiful tasting room too. Guys did a really nice job with that.
Thanks.
Are you allowed to open up now with social distancing and all that?
Yeah, so we're closed, eh? I mean, we from I think it was the 24th of March or something, we went into hard lockdown, which was basically all businesses, everything shut down. And part of that, so we have lockdown in stages. So we're in stage 4 at the moment. We were in stage 5, but we're only allowed to start selling wine in stage 3, which they're talking maybe in 2 weeks. And then from stage 2, restaurants and that can, so at the moment, restaurants are only allowed to do home deliveries. So not even curbside pickup.
Wow.
So restaurants are kind of closed. And then from stage 2, they can start opening with limited number of customers. But the government, I mean, South Africa, we're an interesting country. We've got kind of Cape Town, which feels first world, with third world right next to it. And I think the concern has been that, with these, specifically in the townships, so not so much if you move out into the more rural areas where everything is spaced out. We've got townships where there's very high density, a lot of people in very small space. It's almost impossible for them to self-isolate because a lot of them live with their whole family. So it'll be like 3 generations in one very confined area. So I think, what the government's done, although people have been complaining, I think it's really been a good thing. I mean, we've just hit, I think we've just hit 12,000 cases in the country, and we're on, I don't know, maybe 200 deaths. So, and that's, after over a month, where I think everyone was expecting it to be a lot worse. So I think, and then again, hospitals and, are almost non-excluded to the rural areas. So I think the government, they've done an amazing job in sort of keeping everything at bay, but it's been tough. But it's worldwide, eh? I think everyone's struggled a bit. But yeah, we haven't been allowed to sell locally since the end of March.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Chris, tell us about your background and history. What brought you into the position of winemaker at your company?
So we're a family business, but my dad always loved wine, was always into wine, obviously coming from Johannesburg. He actually developed game reserves. That's what he did. So we spent a lot of time pretty much in the northeastern part of South Africa, near Kruger Park, some of the big game reserves. And he just wanted to go farming. So he loved wine. We started looking around for farms, specifically in the Cape. And we actually bought just before Nelson Mandela was voted in. So I think that was in late 1993. So that was the last time that you could actually sort of pick up a deal, buy a farm for a reasonable price in Stellenbosch, because it was so uncertain. South Africa was on a knife edge. No one knew what was going to happen. And then we were just so lucky to have Nelson Mandela come in as president, just the most incredible man to sort of lead the country out of apartheid and into where we are now. So I think things are still complicated, but that's when we bought. And then, yeah, my dad started making the wine. He made the wine on his own for up until 2000. And we would sell a large portion of our fruit, so sell grapes to other sellers. And one of the sellers we were selling to was Rupert and Rothschild. So the Rothschilds have got a property just down the road from us, the French Rothschilds just down the road from us. And they had a French consultant winemaker called Michel Roulin, who was doing all of their blending. And he loved the Merlots that they made from our grapes. So came to see the vineyards, got on very well with my dad. You know, they both loved hunting. That's my dad. You know, he's the hunter. So he goes and gets us all our meat. But they got on very well. So he actually bought a share in the cellar, and that's where we really expanded. And then in 2007, so I worked for Michel Roulin, for this French guy in Bordeaux, in Pomerol, and Fronsac at two of his properties there, and then at another place in California. And then I came back. My brother wanted to come back, so my dad, we actually bought him out and brought it back into the family, brought the business back into the family. And that was in 2007. So winemaking here in Stellenbosch. At Stellenbosch University is the only place you can study winemaking in South Africa. And then spent a few years traveling, I think as a lot of young winemakers do, and then came back and took over the winemaking. My brother's now marketing and sales. And then we're trying to get my dad to retire. But it's not really happening yet, but a real family business. So.
That's great. I remember one of the pictures on the wall was of you and your family. It was really, really nice to see. That's great. And you said earlier you had actually worked in Napa for a period of time, right?
Yes. So what a lot of, especially my contemporaries, you know, or my sort of generation and the generation just above, you know, with apartheid, South Africa's wine industry, although we're very old, it was incredibly crippled by that time because we weren't allowed to export wine, we weren't importing wine. The whole industry kind of stagnated, and from, you know, the 1950s up until the end of the 1980s, that was the time when industries really established themselves. You know, you had that the famous California France tasting, and you know, they got established. You know, so a lot of the New World, Australia, they were really growing their industries, getting known for quality, where we were just kind of stuck. And also in apartheid, the apartheid government kind of controlled production. So there weren't a lot of private sellers. Everything was kind of these big cooperative sellers. So people would grow fruit, sell it to these cooperatives, and then it was all pricing, and everything was controlled by the government. So when it opened up after apartheid, winemakers started traveling. We started, you know, tasting a lot more international wines. And so basically when I studied, you know, what everyone does is you finish studying, you do your practical work here at a cellar or estate here in South Africa, and then you travel. So my first vintage, I went south. So I went to Margaret River in Western Australia and worked at a cellar called Watershed. So it's just outside Margaret River. And then from there, I went straight over to Bordeaux, and I worked in Le Bon Pasteur in Pomerol, well, between Le Bon Pasteur in Pomerol and Chateau Fontenelle in Fronsac, and then came back to the Southern Hemisphere. So you can do two, you know, obviously Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, you can do 2 harvests a year, and then came back here and then went over to Napa, and I worked at a place called Hartwell. It's now owned by Realm Vineyards in the Stags Leap district in Napa, and after that came back to South Africa. So I mean, you go and you do, you know, you're doing all the emptying tanks, all the manual labor, but it's awesome, and it's a great way to learn. So yeah, that's basically what winemakers do from South Africa now, and I think the industry's come forward in leaps and bounds, you know, in the last 20 years in terms of quality, international exposure. I think going from being known as purely a bulk wine, cheap wine producing area, we're slowly getting people know they can get quality wines from South Africa. So it's a work in progress, but yeah, we're getting there.
So did you always know you were going to be a winemaker from your early days, or is that something that came later?
No, not at all, eh? But I think the wine industry is funny like that, eh? It kind of sucks you in. It doesn't matter. So I finished at school. My never pushed us. They never said we have to, they want us to come back to the farm. They encouraged us to go and do other stuff. And so I'd signed up for a business science degree at University of Cape Town. And when I finished school, I went and worked in the flower auction houses in Holland. And while I was there, I kind of changed my mind and decided to do a Bachelor of Science. And I wanted to go more in that direction. And in doing that, I specialized in viticulture and enology. So never really planned to come back, and neither did my brother, but he's also come back. So it's, but I love it. It's just it's an amazing industry, an amazing lifestyle. And I think the best part about it is just the people that are in the industry. You get anyone who makes wine or is into wine, you've got to have a passion for it to make it work. And they all generally have a similar outlook on life. It's all about lifestyle as opposed to anything else, So I didn't always know.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And that's, as Bob and Chuck and I travel around and visit different people, that comes through so many times. We meet folks like yourself and have an immediate affinity for each other and openness and kind of like, wow, yeah, you do the same thing. We're into the same stuff. We're part of a bigger family, if you will.
Absolutely.
People that are into that, and it's great, especially at this scale, not the gigantic 100-gallon sorts of things, but at this scale. And I was just trying to remember, how many hectares do you have under vine? How many cases of wine do you do a year or so?
Yeah. So the farm itself is 60 hectares. So I think that's about 150 acres or so. But a lot of it is a bit steep. We've got sort of valleys running through it, so we can't plant everywhere. But we've got about 60 hectares of vineyards. So I think must be 70 or 80 acres of vineyards.
Okay.
And then we produce about 12,000 cases, so a year. So depending on the year, we've had a few years of drought, so the yields have been down a little bit. But 12 to 15,000 cases is kind of our production.
Yeah.
Do you ever, or did you ever feel the pressure of making wine at an institution that's been producing wine for 200 years?
No. Well, I mean, there wasn't any wine produced here in apartheid. It was all sold. The grapes were sold. So it was.
Okay, that's right.
It was, it wasn't that established. But I think there is always pressure. My dad had kind of built up a style and a bit of a following, and so But I think that's part of the charm of it. But again, our philosophy, from before I started, is that the wine is made in the vineyards, and if you look after the vines, you get the grapes to where you want them, and you're happy with the fruit. The producing process is more of a finishing off process. I mean, there are things, like barrel maturation and things that you can vary styles in, and you can mess it up in the cellar, so you've got to be careful. But the cellar is maybe 10% of the, sort of the process, where 90% is done in the vineyards. So I think that's where, having the vineyard expertise and knowing what to do when, in what year, in different seasons and things like that. That's really where a lot of the where it gets challenging and gets really stressful. And I think that's where having my dad here on the farm is so amazing. Someone that's been through a lot of seasons. That the advice I get from him in the vineyards is invaluable. But so I think there's always pressure, but that's one of the amazing things about wine. You get one chance a year to make your crop and make your wine that's that vintage. So 2020 we're done. Everything's in barrel. If we messed it up then, that's 2020 gone. So there's always pressure, and I think that's what gives harvest such an amazing kind of vibe and just excitement about it, is that you only get one chance, so there is always pressure. But
You hear a lot in the industry these days that talk about natural
Oh,
wine.
sorry, I'm just going to quickly close this door. Jeff.
I remember the dogs there.
Oh yeah, the dogs are great.
And in fact, when we went back into the barrel room, one of the dogs was out scouting around trying to find if any bungs had fallen out of the barrels.
Yeah, that's Jeff. That's who just barked. And his new thing is he pulls out the barrel wedges. So we stack our barrels 5 high, and then we use wooden wedges at the base of the stacks, a little wooden wedge to basically stop the barrels from rolling out. And he goes and he pulls those out. And
oh my goodness!
So we can probably have a flat Jeff one of these days. But.
Yeah.
So before the dog bark, I was inquiring with you about the movement we hear a lot about these days, the natural wine movement. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you fall with that?
So it's a bit of a loaded question. I haven't tried many unnatural wines, so it's that's part of the challenge. But with our philosophy, our vineyards are sustainable. We're not certified organic, but we don't spray any systemic products. So nothing that gets absorbed. So it's only contact product. And I think more of it is in the vineyards that we're farming for the next generation, and soil health has become a big focus. When I took over the vineyards from my dad, it was still in the stages where everything under the vines looked like a moonscape. They would spray everything dead, you'd just have the vines living, and you ended up with really hard soils. So I think in the vineyards, we've definitely moved more in the sustainable direction. And then in the cellar, I think the philosophy behind natural wines is just nothing added and nothing taken away. And I'm all for that. The greatest, not in terms of, I disagree with adding anything. I just think your wines are lesser if you do. And, the greatest wines that I've worked with have been wines that you bring the fruit in, you don't have to do anything to it. The wine kind of makes itself. That means you're growing your fruit in the right places. You're not having to manipulate and anything like that, and you're farming properly. So I'm all for it. The only thing I do, so we don't add sulfur when we bring the grapes in, because we do all spontaneous ferments, and I don't fine at all. So no fining, no egg whites or anything like that. And I do add a bit of sulfur before bottling. So our sulfur levels are within organic limits, so it's very low. But I do believe, for ageability and that, you do need a little bit of sulfur. But I think once you start having to add acid, do big finings, start really manipulating wines in the cellar, then you should grow other grapes, because you're obviously growing the wrong grapes in the wrong area. So I think there's a lot to the natural wine movement. It's not just having to smoke. Everyone sort of thinks guys that make natural wine smoke their cover crop, and stuff like that. But I think we're moving more towards really a sustainable and wines with a sense of place. And I think once you start moving away from the sort of the natural way of doing it and start manipulating, you lose that sense of place. And so I think it feels like I'm just waffling on. I don't know if that made sense, but
that was very, very helpful, actually. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. So there's a lot of, like you said, it's a loaded question. There's a lot. You'll hear a different response from people who, depending on where you are and who you're talking to. But I think that was a really good description. So tell us about your wines.
Yeah. So we obviously, my dad only made red wines. And he always said that the right bank of Bordeaux is what got him into wine. So Bordeaux varietals have always been a focus. Where we are on the Simonsberg mountain, just outside Stellenbosch, it's traditionally Bordeaux area. And so that was always a focus. When I came back, I started making a bit of Shannon. We've got one vineyard of Shannon Blanc which is a single vineyard. And so that's our white wine that we make. But yeah, we basically specialist in Bordeaux blends and Bordeaux varietals, and then we do pinotage. So pinotage is the South African grape. We tried it with you guys when you were here. It's a hybrid or a crossing between Pinot Noir and Cinsault. It was crossed in the 1920s in Stellenbosch, and the first commercial pinotages were only really made in the 1950s. And so from when we began on the farm, my dad has done pinotage, so that's also a passion. I love it because it's unique. Although it's not an easy one to make. You get very bad examples along with good examples. It's not very consistent. But yeah, and I think so red focused with a little bit of Shannon Blanc. But I think the best is if anyone wants to see our wines, go onto our website, remhoogte.co.za, and you can have a look at what we've got there. But yeah, it's difficult to explain all of them, I suppose. I should show the bottles and that. But
yeah,
it was really wonderful. I remember, I believe we started with your Shannon Blanc when we were visiting there out on the table and surrounding. And Bob and Chuck and I think had a moment where we looked at each other with pointing to our glasses going, oh my God, this is just fantastic stuff. I mean, our time, not only with your Shannon Blanc, but some others there were just amazing, varietal, going so well in that region. We came away loving South African Shannon Blanc. We had not, I don't think any of us had anticipated that at all. One of the things that you mentioned pinotage, and it was a little confusing for us at first with the name pinotage. Someone had said, well, it's a combination of Pinot and Hermitage. And, that was confusing to us, but I guess back in the early 1900s, Cinsault was often called Hermitage.
Yeah, so in South Africa,
Pinotage,
exactly.
Yeah.
So in South Africa, they incorrectly called Cinsault. There was a lot planted, and they called it Hermitage. And then I love your comment on Shannon as well. I think Shannon Blanc, obviously originally from the Loire Valley. South Africa has got the most Shannon planted, more than any other country in the world. And it was originally all planted in the 60s, 70s for making rebate wine, so for making brandies, because it gave very high yields. So in South Africa, they used to call it, or some people still call it steen, which is Dutch for stone, because the bunches were big and compact and very firm. And these vineyards that were all planted for that and for their yields have now got older and older. The yields have dropped and the quality's just gone up. So it's a really exciting category for South Africa as a country. And it's definitely something we're getting known for. So, yeah.
I opened a bottle of your Syrah.
Oh, cool.
Not long after, I don't know, before this, or right as the pandemic was beginning, we adopted your tradition of braai, and I turned my fireplace into a braai. And one of your tasting room personnel suggested that I had to try the Syrah. I don't think we actually had it when we did our tasting. And so we had it with a nice braai cooked steak. It was absolutely the perfect wine. I just wish that I had the discipline to not drink it and save it for another 10 or 15 years. I think I have a Cab and a Cab Merlot still down in my basement. I've got to hide them in some far corner so I don't consume them in pandemic celebration, because I do think your wines are really age-worthy and are going to be fantastic in another 10 years or so. Is that sort of what your attitude
Absolutely.
Towards making? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, for me, I think the great wines of the world can age, and what made me fall in love with wine was drinking older wines. I think it's just so amazing that you can make something and 20 years later you can taste a wine or taste the product of that. You can taste, so the area where it's from, the vintage, the fruit and the vines, or the sort of the climate that they experienced in that year. It's like unlocking a time and a place. And I think that's what I love about wine. I think it's a little bit lost now, and that's the kind of the eternal argument between the winemaker and the marketers. So me and my brother, I want to make wines that I think will age, but in very, invariably they're not that pleasant when they're young. And so that's where the reserve range that we do, our Sir Thomas Cullinan, which is a Bordeaux blend, that Syrah that you mentioned, and our Cab Reserve. Because they're smaller volumes, I can make them with the idea that they're gonna be laid down. And then our other ranges, we sort of make, I don't extract as much, try and get it more accessible at an earlier age. But all of our wines, because of the soils and the slopes, they're quite intense, and they definitely benefit from aging. But if you're gonna drink them young, I enjoy drinking them young as well. Braai is the way to do it. So for our American friends, a braai is basically a barbecue, but you have to do it over wood coals. So we do have gas barbecues in South Africa, but it's not done. It's just kind of frowned upon. It's like putting with a long putter in golf. You can do it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's great fun.
So we have a funny corollary to that. When the three of us started our winery back in 2011, we were all excited about the fact that we could lay our wines down. And back then, we were making wine from fruit other than grapes. And even today, most people will tell you that fruit wine was never intended and should never be intended to be laid down. You make it young, you drink it fresh. Well, the way Ken is making wine is very contrary to that. And many of Ken's wines lay down really nicely. As we're discovering here, we're into our 10th year and been drinking some of our earlier vintages. But so when we got started, that was what we wanted to be all about. We were just going to pack our wines in the back corner of the cellar and not sell them and just sit on them for 2 years and 3 years. And we did this for 2 or 3, 4 years. And I remember we hired this wine, someone who was from the industry came to us from Portland, from Oregon. And she started helping us with the marketing of our wines. And she said, well, we should sell these. And we're like, no, you can't sell those. Well, what about we sell, no, we're sitting on those. And what are you guys doing? You're in the business to sell wine. We need to sell it. And our accountant had issue with it as well. He's like, you're paying taxes on that. Every year you sit on it. So we got smart in our 3rd or 4th year. Thank goodness, because we were losing our shirt. Sitting on wine.
And that's it, eh? I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. So as romantic as it may seem, or wine, it's still a business, and and we're in the business of selling wine. So it's exactly that. So I think when my dad started making the wines, we're still drinking those wines now. So from the 90s, sort of 25 years later, and they're tasting beautiful. But a lot of those wines, he said you couldn't touch them for 5 years. So it was, you would make them 2 years in barrel, and then another 2-3 years in bottle before they were really started opening up or becoming more accessible. So I think in terms of winemaking technique, we've adapted it a little bit. I pick a little bit riper than my dad picked. He was 12.5% alcohol, so picking quite green, where now I'm sort of between 13 and 14. So that little bit of extra ripeness does make them a little bit more accessible. You maybe sacrifice a couple of years of ageability, but you still need your wines to be approachable. We need to be able to sell them. So.
And we do, I'm sure you do the same. We try and educate our customers, let them know, lay these down if you have space in your cellar. And it's relatively few people that have an interest in that, but those that do, we'll lay them down. And it's been fun hearing them come back, 5 years later, and they say, oh, we just had one of your 2012, and like, fantastic. So awesome. We have a pretty young history compared to yours. So, so tell us where we can find your wines. And I know you do bring some of your wines to the States. I think sadly we can't find them here in New Hampshire, but I'm going to see if we can figure out a way to get you here in New Hampshire if you have any interest. Yeah. We actually have a woman we met years ago, and we actually interviewed her on Facebook, and she started an import business here to bring in specialty wines. She started bringing in wines from all over New England to New Hampshire, but she's done such a nice job, and she's so hands-on, and she really does a nice job choosing the wines that she works with. If you're interested, I'd love to put her in touch with you, and maybe she can represent you here in New Hampshire, because I'd like to get some more of your wine. This is very selfish of me, actually, because I don't know any other way to get your wine.
Thanks, Bob. I mean, I know the industry. Everyone kind of hangs on, but yeah. So our importer, I met about 7 or 8 years ago. He's based in Northern Virginia. Well-crafted wine and beverage, and he's the same age as me, was never into wine and got in, and it's also a family business, so we love that. And he brings all our wines in, so he distributes directly in Virginia, DC, and Baltimore. Maryland.
Yep.
And then in New York, we do have a distributor. Also, it's a company that focuses on South African wines that do New York and Connecticut and California. And but I think to get our wines delivered directly to you, I can maybe send you a link. I mean, the easiest might be cellar.com, which is Schneider's in DC. They've got our full range, and they can deliver to most states. But again, we're quite small. So for us, I think one of our focuses since my brother came back and I came back, that we try and work with small distributors and importers, and if possible, family owned and run businesses, because we just feel that's in the long term, that's the most sustainable. We want to be here in 30 years time with our kids selling the wines. We're hoping those businesses will have the same. But that'll be great. I mean, any leads is always much appreciated.
Well, good. I will definitely send this video to her and your contact information. So maybe something can be made to happen. But awesome. Until then, I'll check out cellar.com and see what we can do there. And so you've traveled the world. You've been you did a lot of learning in wine regions all over the world, and I'm sure you've done some traveling outside of that. In all of your travels, is there a particularly special story or place that you would like to share that you visited, winery or wine experience?
Yeah. So I think one of the really cool. So in South Africa, we have a lot of winemakers that surf. I love to surf, and one of the amazing things about it is that a lot of the wine regions of the area have got amazing waves. So Margaret River, great surfing, amazing waves. California, amazing waves. So I think that was really cool for me as a young winemaker. Is wherever I went, I could surf, and it was two passions that just sort of came together. But I think what a lot of people ask me is, where was your favorite area, or what did you like the most? And it's a challenging one. I went from Australia, where I was in a really big commercial cellar, which was strange because a lot of the people I was working with weren't necessarily into wine. It was just a job, and it lost a bit of its feel. But I think my favorite place had to have been France. I was working for family properties, picking there for them. It's a lifestyle, and I think that's what I would like to see us having here. Is when it's time for harvest, all the kids and the family comes, they help pick, you have big lunches, and it's just, they kind of live wine. And that, I love that. I think as much as we are still a business and a commercial operation, I like to think we live wine. We're here for the lifestyle. I work with my brother, we live on the same property. It's such a privilege, and I don't think we're never going to be jet setters and, making millions and millions, but it's just an amazing way to live. And I think a real privilege to be able to do what we do.
That's great. That's funny because I visited France myself, and one of the things that stood out to me is that how pervasive wine was in everything: breakfast, lunch, dinner. There's always wine.
Yeah, that was in France. In France, when I was working, we had we'd go out, pick in the morning, and then have like a 2-hour lunch break, you know, like that big harvest table, lots of wine. And I learned pretty quickly that, you know, a glass at lunch is plenty, because to go back to work after eating a huge meal and drinking wine, it's like torture. So
That's great. So I'm confident that you probably have a pretty spectacular wine cellar, just made up of the wines that you and your dad have been making for the last 25 years, as you mentioned earlier. But I assume you probably have some wines in that cellar that come from other places. So is there a wine in that cellar that maybe you're really hoping for that really special day to open? What would that wine be?
So I think I've got, you know, my dad's collected some fantastic old Bordeaux's, you know, and he's got a couple from 82, which is my birth year, which was a fantastic vintage. So I think some of those. But, you know, at the moment, I think that's one of the great things about wine is you can move around the world and you kind of, what you enjoy changes. But I'm really loving Italian wines at the moment. So, you know, some of those Barolos and yeah, I think I just love that style. I think it's very much like what it's almost more similar to what we are trying to do here than it's closer to, we're almost closer to those style of wines than we are to Bordeaux, you know, with you know, great, nice dark fruit, but then that nice austere kind of dry finish. And so that's what I'm sort of drinking at the moment. But I think those old Bordeaux's are probably what we're going to open, you know, with the next major celebration. And I think that's what I'm excited for.
That's cool. Do you know Craig McNaught?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good. We spent some time with him. I think you know,
yeah.
And we also chatted with him in a couple of weeks ago, and he answered the question. He mentioned his love of Italian wines as well. So that's an interesting.
Well, I think it's strange. I think, you know, Italian wines I think fit. You know, South Africa as a wine region, I think we fit. I always like to think that we fit very nicely between the new and the old world, where we're not fully new world, in that, you know, we're not quite as, like, we can never get what Napa gets, you know, that really plush, juicy, rich fruit. You know, I think there's kind of, we get nice fruit, but then we've got a real kind of austere or kind of savory line that runs through our wines. And I think we fit so nicely between the new and the old world. And I think that's where, you know, maybe in terms of style, a lot of our wines are to some of the Italian reds, you know, especially the Bordeaux varietals we make, you know, where you've got that nice juicy fruit, but there is a real austere kind of slightly dry sort of tannic line running through them. And I think it also goes very well with our food, you know, sort of the curries, so some of the more spicier dishes, and then venison or lamb, you know, some of the meats that we eat, it works really well. So I think there's, and we see a bit of Italian wine here, you know, it's a bit more, it's not priced out the market like a lot of the French stuff is, you know, or the more well-known French stuff. So I suppose we taste more of it.
I wish I could say that was the case here in the States, but it's not.
Yeah. Cool.
So you already mentioned some of the things that you love, or one of the things you love to do when you're not making wine, and that's your surfing. So is there anything else when you know, I know the wine business keeps us all really, really busy, but we do get to break away sometimes. What do you do when you're not surfing or making wine?
So I think, you know, I think drinking wine is a massive hobby and a passion. So it makes, my wife gets very upset because, you know, invariably, luckily now with school, I've got young kids. You know, I've made a lot of friends outside the wine industry, where before every barbecue or social occasion was with friends in the wine industry, and we would sit up all night talking about wine. So I think wine is definitely a hobby, and I love reading about it, traveling to wine areas outside of work, you know, in my own time. But surfing, and then kite surfing, and then we do a little bit of hunting here. So I know that offends a lot of people, so that's also a bit of a challenging one. But we hunt for our own meat, so we'll go out, and it's more than the actual the process of shooting or hunting. It's just the time spent in the wilderness, with either family or friends, that spending time where there's just nothing, and it's quite therapeutic, just getting away from everything. 90% of the time, the places you go have got no cell phone signal. That's almost a prerequisite now. If we're going on holiday, we've got to make sure that there's no signal. But so I think being outdoors, just getting away from everything, I think that and surfing is kind of my therapy.
And drinking.
And drinking.
So that brings me to an interesting point. So, one of the things, we're not like the French here in the States. We're pretty conservative folks, and drinking before noon is the big joke. You just don't do it. And so the statement, it's noon somewhere, really applies here, because it's 10:50 in the morning here, but here you are enjoying a glass of wine.
Yeah, it's almost 5 p.m. So we usually say no drinking until the first plane flies over. So that's usually, sort of 10 in the morning. But no, I think, being in the wine industry, we maybe do drink a little bit too much. But wine is healthy, so it's good for you.
What are you drinking?
So I'm actually drinking, you'll see it's a very interesting bottle, but this is actually it's a wine we're about to bottle, and it's our 2018 Chronicle Cape blend. So it's a blend of all 4 red varieties we grow on the property. And I've just sort of blended it up and got it ready for bottling. And, coming here and chatting to you guys, my wife's got the kids, and it's nice and peaceful here in the offices on a Saturday. So I quite enjoy having, an hour to sit and just taste the wine before we bottle it, just to see that I'm happy with it. And so I haven't drunk a whole bottle. It's like a 250 ml sort of jar. But that's what I'm drinking, just seeing, happy, making sure I'm happy that before we bottle it. Because I'm sure, as you guys know, one of the things with wine is once you've bottled it, that's it. There's no changing. So what I'll do is I'll taste it. I'm actually very happy with this one. So I don't think I'll do anything. But if I think, that something needs to be tweaked or we need to change something, then we'll look at maybe blending a bit of some other varietal or another batch of wine, put a, 2 or 3% in to maybe lift the fruit or lift the acid or do something to it. But so no major adjustments, but just but I'm happy with this one. So cheers.
Excellent. Cheers.
That's great.
I got my coffee here. So Chris, this may seem like a strange question, but I ask everybody the same question. So it's your turn. So have you figured out what you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. No, it's I think I don't know. I think I'll feel like I've made it if I'm where my dad is one day, where I've got my kids around and working in the business. I think that would be a real I think I will feel that's kind of a goal. So I think that's where me and my brother are working a lot towards. That is, we really want to build a business that we can give to our kids. And I think that's, that's sort of, if I grow up one day and maybe have achieved that, I will be happy. I'll be happy if I don't, but that's kind of a goal.
Good. Don't grow up too quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've this has been a great conversation. I've had sort of my questions answered. Is there anything that I missed that you'd like to share with us here in the States about your winery, you or anything?
No, I think just for guys watching, I think South Africa, we've had such a challenging past. I mean, it's still challenging now, but if the wines kind of got a reputation, especially in the 90s, you know, of just not being pleasant. And I think one of the things we're trying to do is change perceptions by traveling, getting people to travel here, you know, to see that there is quality out there. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of the quality is at slightly higher price points because the bulk produced stuff is not that good. So I'd just like to encourage guys watching, you know, go out on a limb and try some more expensive South African wines, and I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised. And if you have the opportunity to taste, then, you know, go for it. But yeah, well, I just want to say thanks so much for having me on, guys. It's been so good to see you guys again, and I really want to come over there and visit you guys over there.
Well, I hope you can someday. And I have to tell you, you have developed 3 champions of South African wine who have done nothing but spread the word. And we're going to do our best to grow the availability. Again, a little bit of selfishness going on here, but there isn't a lot of South African wine in New Hampshire right now. There's just a handful of selections, and so we've been talking it up, and we're sharing videos like this with our customers, and making sure that someday we have a better representation of your wines and other of the great wines, because you guys are really doing some amazing stuff in South Africa. At the same time, you know, I always say the best wines in the world are those wines that you find within a few hundred miles of where they're made, because most wines never leave that space. You know, there's something, you know, there's tens of thousands of wineries in the world, and probably only about 5% of them ever leave the region that they're produced in. So if you travel, as you know, you get to taste amazing wines, and that's sometimes really the way to taste the best wine.
Exactly. And the number of times I've traveled, been to the cellar, bought the wine, just been blown away, and then you bring it back and pour it for everyone, and it's never quite as good, you know?
Yeah.
It's like exactly what you say. So
that's so true.
Ken and Chuck, do you have any parting words?
Yeah, I do. So while we were talking, I went to cellar.com and put together an order of a case of your wine. And I'm surprised that Syrah they're selling for $60 a bottle. I didn't realize, I probably should have hid that in my cellar somewhere. I just, you know, used it as my retirement funds in another 25 years or something, and sell it at auction at Sotheby's for $1,000. But I made a nice order, and I got really excited. It's $205 for a case of wine. I'm really jonesing for some of your Chenin Blanc. And then I got to the shipping part, and it's all big letters saying, wah, 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 we can't.
They can't ship to New Hampshire.
Well, they're having a problem communicating with Federal Express, so they apologize for the inconvenience.
You can get hold of Canopy. So Canopy Wines are our distributor in New York, and they can sell direct to the public as well. So Canopy, Canopy, like a vineyard canopy.
I'll look them up.
You can try them.
Yeah, I think you can get them. They're just having a glitch right now, but it is there. But I'll also say there's not a whole lot of bottles in their inventory, and they've got 4 bottles of this, and I bought out a bunch of them. So
okay, cool.
So they'll be ordering more, I presume, soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
But yeah, no, thanks so much for chatting with us. We had such a great experience in South Africa. I fell in love with Chenin Blanc, and everybody we met was so nice and so engaged and alive, and it was really an inspiring trip. So whatever wines you're drinking that's making everybody happy there and high-spirited, bravo, keep it up. And we look forward to coming back and visiting you when all this nonsense is over with.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sure.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks, guys. Again, I mean, and I think you said it, Ken, there is like this, with other guys in the industry, you just have this immediate connection. And it's always great to catch up, and appreciate the time, and I appreciate the orders.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Great, Chris. Best of luck for everything.
Thanks, guys. Have a good lockdown.
Cheers. All right. Yeah.
Cheers.
And best of luck to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in person. I don't know if you know, but we are truly planning. We were going to do it in January of 2021, but because of the crisis, we just postponed it to January 22. But we are planning to invite our club members, as many as 35 of them, to join us on a trip to South Africa to share our experiences with them. We just had such a great time. We thought this is perfect. And we've worked with a few people on the ground in South Africa who've been generous with their time and helpful in making this happen. So it's not going to be this year, this coming year, but the following year, you can expect we're going to come with a whole crew of wine lovers, and we're going to descend on you.
Yeah, Bob, come and join us. We'll do a braai for them, man.
Awesome. Look forward to that.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you again for joining us, and you have a great afternoon. Stay healthy and safe out there, and hope your winery gets open soon and gets back to normal as soon as we can. So, cheers.
Thanks so much,
Take
guys.
care.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for watching our video today. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. If you would like to see more videos like this, click the subscribe button or visit our webpage to see a list of all upcoming events and watch previously recorded interviews and presentations. From all of us here at Hermit Woods, thank you for watching. Be well and stay safe.